Hello guys and girls, Voices from the Dark here, and welcome to the 5th part of my Skyrim Machinima tutorial series, where we are going to be going over lip syncing, aka making your character talk in game. I'm going to go over the process of importing audio into the creation kit to allow for lip synced dialogue that will show up in game, meaning that your Machinima character or in-game actor or follower will be able to move their lips just like any other NPC in Skyrim, and it's a pretty essential step if you want to create immersive machinima, and it's actually very easy to do. We're just going to be following a few steps. It's, once you have the routine down, you have the technique down, it's not difficult. It's just a bit tedious, especially if you have a lot of dialogue, but before I get into how we're going to be doing this, I'm going to show you what we'll be doing. So let's have a look at an example of what we'll have created by the end of this tutorial. I've instructed the remaining 2 sorcerers who are keeping the meadery safe to make sure that these mages have a proper burial. When word of your recovery reaches Solitude, you'll be called in immediately. We're best off waiting in Whiterun for an escort north. Okay, so let's move straight into step 1, which is going to be all about writing and recording your audio, because you have to take a few things into consideration before you create your audio.
Why do wizards write books? Because they're good at spelling.
First thing is that there is a limit to how long the sentences can be. Right now I've pulled up something from Kijor Season 3, this is from Episode 3. It's a back and forth dialogue between Kijor and Marthar, and I've decided to focus on this part right here. This is going to be the important part we're going to be working with today. So as you can see, this is a rather long line right here. And we have a little limitation in the creation kit. You can only add lines that are up to 150 characters long. So often you'll have sentences or lines like these that are longer than 150 characters. And that means that you have to rewrite the line so it's shorter, or you'll have to break it up into different parts and then just make sure that the transition between the parts are best. But generally what you want to do is make sure that you don't have any really long sentences with lots of commas that end up being over 150 characters altogether. This includes the spaces and dots and so on and so forth. So looking at this right here, I would say, okay, this is probably line 1, and we can make this be line 2. These are 2 sentences in one, but because this length is probably not over 150, just looking at it, we can probably make this into 2 sentences right here. So that's going to be today's goal. So that's the first limitation. You're limited to 150 characters per line. Something to keep in mind so you don't make ridiculously long sentences. Now, each line you make can have their own facial expression expressed in the creation kit. That's another little thing to keep in mind. So, right now I'm going to be opening up Audacity. And Audacity is a free audio recording software. And it's very useful for, well, what we'll be doing today. What I've pulled up right here is all the dialogue I did from Marthar in Episode 3, but we'll only have to focus on the first few lines up here. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to zoom in on that. So as you can see, if you look here, I've instructed the remaining 2 sorcerers to make sure they have a proper burial. That's this sentence right here. And then the other one, when word of your recovery and we're best off waiting, that would be these 2. Okay, so we've located our text, and it doesn't look to be ridiculously long. I feel like we have some good chunks of dialogue here, which is good. Now, we need to do this in chunks of 150 characters per line. So let's say that this is going to be the first Marthar line. We'll highlight that in Audacity, and then we're going to export that. But before we export that, we have to take a few precautions, because the creation kit can only take a certain type of file. First of all, you have to make sure that your audio track is mono, not stereo. If you do have a stereo track here, you can very easily change it into a mono track by just going to Tracks, Stereo Track to Mono, and bada bing bada boom, it'll be mono. It doesn't degrade the sound quality in any way, because often microphones don't really take advantage of the stereo capabilities of a microphone. Correct me if I'm wrong, but to me the sound sounds pretty much the same. It's different with music or sound effects where you want it to be coming and be louder on one ear than the other ear, but dialogue you generally want it to just be centered. regardless of that, something to note before you drag and select this audio is that sometimes characters in Skyrim can be a bit slow when it comes to saying their sentences. They will speak the audio before they move their lips. And this can be an issue because they will get to the end of this sentence and jump to the next sentence without finishing their mouth movements, causing there to be like this abrupt like whoop closing of the lips before it continues. Now, the best way to combat this seems to be just to leave some space, just some quiet space at the end of every sentence you render. This might result in your characters having a bit more of a pause before they say lines, but it does beat, having them cut off the dialogue suddenly. You can mess around with that and figure out what works for the individual lines. Now, once we have found a good section of sound, which fits what's in our script, we're going to go into File, Export the selected audio, which is going to be just this section. And I've gone ahead and created this temporary dialogue folder in my Documents folder. So this is where we'll be saving all of the files we're going to be using in this project. Now, there are a few more limitations here that you have to keep in mind. You can't just save this as an MP3 or as an OGG file or whatever. It has to be a 16-bit WAV file. This is important because it's the only type of file that the creation kit will accept. So, all in all, it needs to be a mono track. You need to have selected one specific type of audio. You can't just, if you accidentally export all the audio and try to import that, the creation kit will just crash on you. So make sure you only have a little fraction, because if it tries to play something that's way too long, it'll just automatically crash. It needs to be a WAV file, 16-bit. Now you need to name this file something specific too. I know we're being very picky here. It needs to be called temp. Meaning when I save this file, it's going to, let me just pull it up. It's going to be called temp.wav. And this is important because later on we're going to use this file to overwrite a file that the creation kit creates with the same name. So it's useful having it named like this, because then you can just drag and drop and overwrite. So now that we have the first line, we need to look at the second line. 1 word of your recovery, blah de blah de blah. That would be this next one. Since this is the last line, we don't have to worry about adding too much space at the end. So hopefully this space will make sure that Marthar can finish his lip movements before this kicks in. Because you can use one console command to make them say long sentences or hold long speeches, as long as you're careful about having the right amount of space between the lines. So we're going to export this selected audio, and this one we'll just call temp2 in the same format. It's not important what you name the other ones, because you're just supposed to be renaming them temp after a while. So if I call it temp2, I could just remove the number 2 and I got a temp file. So that's how I usually name them. Okay, that is pretty much step 1 completed. We took a look at our dialogue. We chopped it up into sensible bits. We exported that audio from Audacity with our amazing techniques, and in our temporary dialogue folder we now have these 2 files, which we will be implementing into the creation kit. But next up is step 2, where we will be opening up the creation kit and making the quests.
Why are pirates pirates? Because they just are.
So go ahead and launch up your creation kit now. I do recommend you watch my other tutorials on this, because I will not be going over the basics of the creation kit. Instead, I'm going to assume that you know what I know about the creation kit, which I teach in the other episodes. But I'd like to go over once again that if the creation kit ever seems to like freeze or be slow, oh, it's not responding, it's just taking a while. It can take minutes upon minutes to load stuff. So just have a bit of patience and you'll be just fine. So you want to load up your ESP file here. I have a custom one called VF31. Set it as active file and load up and be ready to ignore any errors, and I'll see you on the other side of the error mayhem. Okay, the creation kit is loaded, and don't be scared if your creation kit is looking any different from mine. I have my other like cell view and render window back down here in the background. They're just sort of obstructed by the object window. If you ever lose any of these windows, you can bring them back here from the view tab. But for now, I'm happy we're here. Open up character and click on quest. Now we are going to be creating a quest. And it's not going to be your typical, oh, go in this cave, kill 5 bandits and I'll give you a sword quest. It's simply going to be a quest we can use to to initiate dialogue in game. So right click anywhere and select new. So the idea of the quest, as I've said before, it's important to have a good prefix so you can easily filter out any non-custom quests. So my prefix is always VFTD. So let's call this one VFTD test talking, because it's just a test. I'm going to be deleting this after the tutorial. So start game enabled, run once, just leave it like that, hit OK. Now, where could the quest be? Good thing I made a useful prefix, VFTD. So I'll start off by showing you my own file, which is cinematic talking. This is my big Machinima file. So as you can see, it has 481 users. You might be like, wow, that's a lot of actors. Yes, because I've learned something while I was researching this tutorial, which I should have been employing from the very beginning. And that is the conditions. I'll go over that in just a bit, but I can show you an example of how I've organized my file in my VFTD Cinematic Talking. As you can see, I have them ranked after episodes. I have episode 1, 2, and 3, each with their own lines. So this is roughly the amount of lines needed to make one episode of Kijora Season 3. But some of these contain several, like if I choose Alice and I open up her file, we can see that she has several lines which are all, you know, within that 150 character chunk with different facial expressions going down the list. So if I call this topic ID in game, if I do say VFTD Ep1 Alice 01, she will begin saying all of these lines one after another. And that's enough time for me to film that and, you know, get it going. So it's rather simple, but under here you can see a conditions tab, because right now if you open up one of these lines right here, you can see that every single voice type is learning to say this line, meaning this might freeze a bit. If we go and view the valid NPCs, all of these people are going to be able to say the line. And at first I was like, whatever, it doesn't matter a lot, but it has resulted in some strange bugs, and I've almost fully broken the dialogue in my Skyrim game. So I'm going to teach you how to not do that. It's quicker not to add a condition, but it can mess up your game a bit. So we're going to be careful. So that's pretty much how I've gone about doing it. Now let's show you how to do it. Open up your little test talking thing, whatever you named it. It does not matter as long as you know what we're doing. Move over to player dialogue. And you're going to be right clicking over here in the branches section and select new. And I often categorize these after episodes, but you can do it after whatever you want, like your project name or whatever you're working on. So we're just going to do like a VFTD part 1. I'm going to do part because I already have episode and the episode prefixes, so I'm just going to do VFTD part 1. And it's going to ask for like a starting topic ID. You could just leave that at default, it doesn't matter, because we're not going to be using that one. Now, in here, in the topic section, this is where the ID is very important, because this ID is going to be what you're going to be calling in-game using the console command. So let's say if I wanted to, let's say I was making episode 2 of Kijora Season 3 and I wanted to have Marthar's first line, I would know in my head, oh, okay, that's VFTD Ep2 Marthar 01, because that's how I made the prefix. I did episode number, and then actor and the line number. So I can do something similar here. So you need some sort of order in your topic IDs if you're making a lot of dialogue. So I would make like VFTD part 1, and then I would need the actor, which is going to be saying this, which is Marthar, and then I would do 01. So whenever I'm in game, I want to call this, I need to remember this line right here. Now something that's useful is if you open up your notepad right here, you can take this code and you can copy it in. And if you ever need to remember what sort of dialogue is connected to this, then you should not close it like that. You should open up your WordPad and just drag all of this in. Control C to copy, Control V to paste. And there you go. Now you know that when I call this code in-game, Martha will say this. So I usually have like a little notepad on the side containing all the different codes. I mean, I can show you an example of that real quick. Here you can see my... I'm gonna close this. My episode 3 say codes. So here you can see, okay, so the actor Drax Namus is saying these and these lines, and Dreadeye is saying this and this. So it's just a useful little thing to have on the side. As you can see, it's quite quite long, but then again, I have a lot of dialogue. So, now that you understand the naming, let's go ahead and click OK. Right click and... Wait a minute. We can't make a new one. What is this sorcery? It's broken, Dark, help. This is a really annoying bug. But in order for you to actually make new text that we can insert here, you have to reload your creation kit. I know, it's a pain. We all have to do it. But before you do that, I'd like to make it clear that if you know that, okay, I'm going to be needing 5 different lines, like VoicesFromTheDark Part 1 Marthar 01 through 05. Okay, how would I easily go about doing that? Because if you make all of those topics right now and then reload your creation kit, then all of them are going to be editable at once, so you don't have to restart after every single line you create. So click on the name right here, and then I would just copy the name, avoid the custom thing at the end, right click new, and I would hit Ctrl V to paste it in, and then I would just change the 1 to a 2. And I would do the same, change the 1 to a 3. So this is just a way to sort of mass produce these topic IDs, especially when you're making, 20, 30 for each character in each episode. It's useful to know. Well, we can't do anything here, so, well, save, ignore warnings, close it, and reopen it, and I'll see you on the other side. Okay, now that it's all loaded up again, filter for VFTD, or whatever your prefix was, and load up the test talking. And we'll have a look, and what do you know? It's all white, and we can change it as we see fit. So, let's hit new, and let me talk to you a little bit about the whole text feature in the creation kit. So first of all, let's open up my little document with the dialogue. Now we know that we split this into 2, so let's take the first part that we'll need, which stops right here. Control C to copy, Control V to paste, and it will count how many letters you have up here. So we can see that it's 125 letters. Okay, that's useful. It'll also do a little spell checking, so if you have anything that's, misspelled, then it will point it out. I think I might actually have a word that's misspelled in this, but usually just my own script for when I'm when I'm speaking and recording voices. I'm not always that careful about the grammar because it doesn't show up as you're speaking. Regardless of that, let's see. I've instructed the remaining 2 sorcerers. Let's make this a sad face because he's talking about funerals, and that's no fun. So you can set this anywhere from 0 to 100. I would recommend almost always setting it like above 30 to see any sort of effect on the character's face. Let's just do it at 75 to really drive the point home. And right now all this is grayed out. That's on purpose. Click OK. It will open up this window, which is a bit more advanced, but do not worry. And right now, if you just go back to your text and double click, all of this is unlocked. And this is very familiar to what you saw in my own Skyrim cinematic talking file. All of these voice actors will learn the line if I now hit save. But I don't want everybody to learn it. I don't want all of these characters having to worry about learning a new line. That seems very insensitive of me. So we're going to cancel this, and I'm going to talk about conditions, because using conditions, you can basically make the say command check, is this actor the correct actor? If so, talk. If not, don't talk. And I believe it saves you a lot of space, and it makes it easier to load your project. It's less buggy. It's just overall good practice, and I'm probably going to start implementing it from the next episodes of Kajor Season 3 onwards. So you want the condition function to be getIsId. So it's basically going to check if this actor is, and then you gotta select your actor. The important thing about this actor is that they need to be unique. They need to have the unique checkbox checked in the creation. And I show you how to do that when we make a follower in like episode 2 or something. So VoicesFromTheDark Marthar. And once you have your actor, hit OK, equals 1. So it's basically checking, okay, so if the actor is Marthar, equals 1 is true, then he'll say the line. If not, he won't. So if you open this up, only one voice type, male Nord, because that's the follower voice I gave to Marthar. View the valid NPCs, only Marthar is allowed to say this line. Well, that seems nice, but we don't have any line yet. Well, we're about to get to that in just a second. That has been step 2. We've made the quest, and we've written the dialogue, but now we're going to talk about importing the audio.
Why did the bandit take a bath? To get a clean getaway.
So now we need to make sure that we can get the audio in here that's the same as this one. Now, the creation kit itself has a record function, so I could be like, I've instructed the blah de blah de blah de blah, and I could use that in game. Why am I not using that feature instead of doing it, you know, it's so much easier doing it here. Why am I doing it through Audacity? Listen to the sound quality. I've instructed the blah de blah de blah de blah. That is why I'm not using it. So yeah, actually, is this recording the wrong? It might be recording my webcam. Whatever. Sound quality is, yeah, you have no control over the sound quality here, and I hate it. So basically, what I just recorded has created a file somewhere in a folder called temp.wav. And the second I hit save, that file is going to be put into this directory right here, and it's going to be used in the game. So we want to access the temp file, replace it with our own temp file, which we made in step 1, and then save it, meaning that it saves our file. So we're sort of manipulating the creation kit a little bit, and I don't think he minds. So open up your temporary dialog folder where you have stored your dialog file. So let's put that down there so it's not a lot in the way. And then you're going to open up this folder right here, the voice folder. How do you get to the voice folder? You got to go to program files, and if you have Steam, then you go to Steam, Steam apps, common, Skyrim, data, sound, voice. It's quite deep in there, but once you get to this folder and you have used the record feature at least once, you'll see a little file here. If you for some reason can't record and you don't have a temp file here, don't worry about it because you can still just paste it in. This is just for an example. So it will create this, and this is the recording I just made, which is just awful and not usable. And if I now go to the temporary dialog folder, where this is the line I want to say, let me just point out that before you transfer anything over, make a backup of it. So I could do like an extra folder, and I could do Control-C to copy, go in here, Control-V to paste them. So now I have a backup of them. I can take this file, drag it over, drop, and it'll be like, are you sure you want to move this? You're about to overwrite it. And I'm like, yes, I want to overwrite the file. And it'll go ahead and do it. So now this is my own file. So if you go to the creation kit and hit preview, instructed the remaining 2 sorcerers who are keeping the metery safe to make sure that these mages have a proper burial. It will be the correct sound file. It might be a bit low. I usually recommend cranking up the audio in Audacity before you export it, just to make sure that the audio actually is, you know, audible in the game itself, which is something I didn't do here, but it's something you can do, and I think it also makes it a bit easier for the machine to lip sync. So make sure that your audio is loud before you export it. I can add that as a little tip back through some text in the other stages. Regardless, we have the text, we've hit preview, we made sure that we're saying exactly what's on the text because that's important. You need this and this to match. And once that matches, the creation kit will do all the lip syncing for you. All you gotta do is hit save. And once it says Y and Y here, you'll know that it's working. Hit OK, hit OK, hit OK, save. And ignore any errors. Now, if you were to launch up Skyrim, you could make an actor say that. Not just any actor. Marthar would say it. If you try to do it on any other actor, they won't. They'll refuse. And that's good for just keeping the game sane, I think. Alright, so if we go back here, we want to add one more line of dialogue. And we can do that without having to create a whole new say command like using the next VFTD Part 1 Marthar. So we can just do it all here. Just click under it, select new. We can make a new line right here, right now. So let's do that. We'll open up our dialog window once again, and we'll copy that, Control-C, paste that, Control-V, and as you can see, it's going to point out that I misspelled immediately, and I will immediately change that, so thank you for that. The spell check is an okay feature. It's a bit annoying because it tries to correct every word it doesn't understand, like names, like Kijar, it's like that's not a word, and I'm like, you're so ignorant. So when word of your recovery reaches solitude, you'll be calling immediately. So let's just make a happy face here, just so you can see the change in facial expression. We'll make like 100, like a super big old smile on his face. We can't do anything here. Hit OK. Open it up again. Hey, we have access to the features. What do you know? That's just how the creation kit works. So once again, open up the voice folder. Right now we have this temp file here. This is the temp file we used in the first sentence. and we want to replace that. So let's open the temporary dialog window. This is the line we want to add here. So we're just going to click on the name so we can edit it, call it temp instead of temp2, drag it, replace the file that's there, close up those, and if I hit preview,
when word of your recovery reaches Solitude, you'll be called in immediately. We're best off waiting in Whiterun for an escort north.
Alright, it's matching, it sounds good. We'll hit save, okay, and now when I call this in game, he's going to go say this, he's going to wait a little bit, and he's going to say this. And it can only be used on Marthar. Alright, that's step 3 pretty much done. Now we can go ahead and try this out in game.
What did Sheogorath say to the man who refused to wear pants? Come to the Shivering Isles. I can clearly see your nuts.
Alright guys and girls, here we are in Solitude. There's one important thing you have to note. Once you load up your game for the first time, like right now after editing the new files, the dialogue won't work. What you have to do is that you have to go and save, create a brand new save, and then you have to load up that save. And once you've loaded up the new save you made after editing the voice files, it will work, just like it's supposed to. So hey, Nosfer over here, let's try to make him say Marthar's new voice files. And I'm going to be talking a bit about console commands to make it easier for you to control characters who are talking a bit later. That's sort of like extra knowledge. So we'll do, I will already typed it a few times here, say followed by the topic ID, which is VF3 part 1, Marthar 01. So use this command to call upon any topic ID and make a character say it if they fit the conditions. As you can say, it's going to say get is ID equals 0, meaning, hey, Noster is not the right guy for this sentence. I'm not going to make him say it because he doesn't know how. Okay, so who can say it? Well, we set it to only be Marthar who's capable of saying it. So let's do help Marthar player.playsetme 0z005e63, and there we go. There's Marthar. Beautiful old guy. Do you watch it? You watch your tongue right now. Alright, so if I click him, and I just press the up arrow to select my previously used console commands. If you start seeing a huge list of get emotion, and you can see get is ID equals 1, he's about to say the line, so let's exit the console command, and behold.
I've instructed the remaining 2 sorcerers who are keeping the meadery safe to make sure that these mages have a proper burial. When word of your recovery reaches Solitude, you'll be called in immediately. We're best off waiting in Whiterun for an escort north.
So the lip syncing seems to work fine, but something you might have noticed was that during his second sentence, he started speaking before the lips began moving. Now this is something I only know how to fix during editing. So if you're making a follower and you're struggling with this, I can't really help you there. This is going to be for Machinima purposes only. So now that Marthar has said those lines, we know that, hey, our dialogue works. So right now we have some footage of that, and I can use that footage in my editor and sync it up. I'm going to talk about the editor a bit later, but right now I'm going to show you some tricks when it comes to recording characters who are saying lines. First of all, try not to have your player say the dialogue. There's some limitations when it comes to the player saying dialogue. Like I can totally click on the player here and do like say VF3 ep1 like Kijor 01. Actually, I'll just show you an example. I've made these commands like universal, so anybody can say it right here. Let's do Marthar 01. I think this one is a bit long though. Whatever. As you can see, Kijor just goes ahead and says the line, but there's a few things that are negative about it. First of all, there's no subtitles. And secondly, if you want them to shut up, you can just use the say command again while they're talking and they'll stop. If you go into TFC mode, which you'll most likely be, and you try to make them talk, it won't work. You hear the audio, but he's not actually going to be moving his lips. So that is why you don't want to use the player character, because they are limited in so many ways. If you have to make your player character talk, you need to create a separate actor that looks just like your player and dress them up the same way. It's a bit of a hassle, but these dialogue lines can't be used in TFC, which is a bit of a problem. I'll just hope Kijor shuts up in a bit. So that's one thing. Try not to use your player character when you're doing this. Secondly, it's all about controlling your characters. That's probably the most difficult part about making Skyrim Machinima, and I've taught you a few ways to control your characters in the past. Sadly, they cannot be implemented here. Let's say I wanted that guard to say something, but hey, the guard's walking around. What do I do? Well, you might say, oh, just use TAY, which is going TAI? Yes, I. TAI. All AI processing off. Everybody stops. Perfect. Okay, let's go up to the guards. Okay, and then I'm gonna do, let's see, say VFTD EP1, and then I don't know which lines are short and which ones are not. Let's just do something like, I don't know, Grotho 1.
Quiet, Argonian.
Can you take off that?
Request permission to speak, or hold your tongue.
You might be like, hey Dark, that works, what are you talking about? Well, if you try to make him use any other lines after this, he can't, because now he's stuck in the state that you brought him. He's still trying to finish a sentence, but he can't because his AI is toggled off. So this makes him of very little use to us if we're recording a line with several say commands, right? So, if you just toggle the AI back on again, now he's going to be able to say more lines. How do I fix this? Okay, so let me show you how I set up scenes. Because obviously when using lip syncing, I can't have people disabled using TAI, you know? Because then they won't be able to say the lines. How do I do that? First off, I use TAI to set up the scene. Everybody is stopped and I click on the different actors and I use TC, toggle controls, and I put them into position. If they for some reason won't budge, I'll just run into them and there we go. If not, you can use the push actor away code that I talked about. Let's say I wanted these two to talk. So let's place you at like a little bit of a distance. Drop the TC, and since I have disabled their AI, they're just going to be looking. There we go. I want them to be looking straight at me. Why do I want them to be looking straight at me? Because the characters in this game often stare straight at the player, and since I want these two to stare at each other, I have to be in the middle of them. I know it's a bit uncomfortable, but we'll have to make do with it. And then we just use TFC from first person. Player is invisible. So right now they're staring at the player, but it appears like they're staring at each other. Now the problem is, if I want them to talk, I would have to enable their AI again. But the second I now exit console commands, they're going to be back to their old antics and they're going to start walking around or eating bread or whatever NPCs in Skyrim want to do these days. And we don't want that. How do you fix it? Click on each individual character, do TC. Boom. They're not going to move. Everybody else will keep going about their business, but these two characters will not move because you are controlling their movement. And as long as you're in the camera, you can move around, but they will still be stationary. Is this seriously floating in the air? I guess it is. So that's how I just navigate around the place in TFC mode, and they're not able to move. The only problem here is that when you go back to being your player again, you can't move without everybody moving, so you have to go and manually use TC on everybody and then disable their AI with TAI again. That's usually why these big dialogue scenes take a long time to make, but right now they can say as many lines as they want, so let's make sure they have a little bit of a conversation. Like I could fly over to Mr. Guard over here and be like, okay, Mr. Guard, say VF to the EP1 Grotho 1, because I know it's a short one.
Quiet, Argonian.
Okay.
Request permission to speak.
You're not talking to an Argonian, but whatever.
Hold your tongue.
And I can like zoom around as he talks. We'll do this properly in just a bit. And then this guy's like, oh hell no, you did not just say that. I'm gonna reply with the same line.
Quiet, Argonian. Request permission to speak,
Ooh.
or hold your tongue.
And that's how you would do it. Just remember that when you exit TFC mode, everything goes crazy. So that is a few tricks, a few tips and tricks. Hey, come back here, Mr. Guard. On how you control characters and still make them talk in lip sync. Okay, now let's make sure we get a good shot of Marthar talking so I can show you how to fix up on the dialogue during editing, because if you're making a machinima, you have to edit. That's just how it is. Unedited machinima, no thank you. So as you can see, I just typed in TFC and Suckism 0.1. I don't even need to look at my keyboard anymore to know how to type those. So I want the camera to pan in slowly at Marthar here, And then after it's panned for a while, use TM to remove all menus. And after it's been panning for a while, I want him to start saying something, meaning I have to open the console command window. But I'm going to remove the act of me opening that window during editing. So while the game is stopped now, and that would break the flow of the video, we're just going to edit that part out. So VFTD part 1, Marthar 01. Hide the menus. And there we go. So during editing, we'll totally remove that little zoom in part right there. We'll keep it zoomed and just remove me going in, and it'll just be a smooth transition, and it'll look like there was never any gap there to begin with. And now you could also stop again, do TM, and make him say something else, like VFTD Ep1 Grotho 1, you know?
Quiet, Argonian.
And then he's suddenly talking in an orc voice.
Or hold your tongue.
You know? And then we can just end the recording right there. Okay. So, now that I've shown you how to work with actors and placing them and talking, we need to discuss what to do with the footage. Step 4 is complete. Nobody wants to give you anything, Noster. Nobody. Let's move on to step 5.
Did you hear about the 2 Argonians that walked into a tavern? The second one should have seen it coming.
Step 5, we gotta polish it up in editing. So open up your favorite editing software. For me, it's going to be Sony Vegas Pro 13. I think you can get a free trial of it, actually. And then just find out wherever your footage was stored and just drag and drop it right down. Okay, so right here, we are going to be finding the section that we wanted to work with. It was all the way towards the end. So as you can see, if it ever seems blurry in Sony Vegas, go to switches, disable resample. Yeah, it's an awful thing. It's an awful thing. So let's make sure we found just where it was supposed to start. Okay. Around here. So let's zoom in a little bit on what we're doing here. So as we go along, we'll see the zoom in. Alright, seems smooth, everything is good. It stops. That's because we opened the console command window. So we need to find the exact point in time where that window is opened. Let's see. Right here, I believe. Yeah. And then we gotta trim away all the time I spend in the editor and find just the time when I'm out of it again. So you gotta be really detailed, but if you do it like that, then nobody should be able to even tell the transition, really.
I've instructed the
like, it's impossible to notice. You can't see it because it's essentially not there. So we're zooming in and he's saying his lines, which we will replace in a little bit to make them sound better and louder compared to everything else. And then, as you can see, we have yet another little stop here. Where's that stop? Right there, I believe. Then I open it up again and find the exact spot, I resume. It's somewhere like there.
Quiet, Argonian.
Yeah, that's seamless.
Permission to speak or hold your tongue.
And that will be the end of it. Okay. And then we can just fade that out. So here's the thing. Whenever I make machinimas in Skyrim, I rarely use audio from these recordings. I recreate the audio from scratch to have full control over it, because right now I would have to accept that the dialogue is low compared to the noises in the environments. And you don't want to be at a lack of control as an editor. You want to have full control of everything. So what I recommend is that you keep this audio for now as reference points. Okay, so if you want to import the dialogue of Marthar, now I assume that you have like a longer voice clip and that the voices, the sound clips that are right here are just like a smaller part of it. So naturally you would want to import the whole thing for simplicity's sake, so you don't have like tons of like little temp.wav files here. So I'm going to go into my KS3 folder and I'm going to pull up the Marthar dialogue. So this is like the full version of the projects that we were working on. And if you remember, I took the first few lines of dialogue and used them. So I'm going to just split them like that. So this is the first line, this is the second line. So now I have to go in and find out exactly where the audio in the game starts, which is right there. And then I take this file and add it here. And the reason I do this is because I have so much more control over this layer, because this layer is affected by any sort of background noise on the PC or the game. This one is totally crisp and clean, and I can change it as I see fit.
I've instructed...
And as you can hear,
I've instructed the remaining 2 sorcerers who are keeping the metery safe.
it's slightly off sync, because often the voice in the game plays a bit before it's supposed to, before the lips actually move. So now that I've added this as a reference right here, I'm going to find the second reference point.
When word of your...
And about here he can start speaking. It's just a matter of trial and error here. And once I've done that, I can click on this track and I want to remove it. So I'm going to press U. You can also right click, group, remove from, and then delete it. Meaning this won't be deleted along with it. We can do the same for this first one. U, deletes. Okay. So now we just have this voice track right here to worry about.
I've instructed the remaining 2 sorcerers who are keeping the metery safe to make sure that these mages have a proper burial.
Yeah, fits.
When word of your recovery reaches Solitude,
Much
you'll
better.
be called in immediately. We're best off waiting.
Wait, that one didn't really line up. Let's have a look.
When word of...
I should maybe push it a bit.
When word of your recovery reaches Solitude, you'll be called in immediately. We're best off waiting in Whiterun for an escort north.
Okay, so I have to do this a bit earlier then.
When
Like
word
here.
of your recovery reaches Solitude, you'll be called in immediately. We're best...
So as you can see, sometimes the engine derps up a little bit like this. This seems to be a very poor example, but it appears that it have derped up a little bit because it's almost starts with a line before he opens his mouth, which means that you also have to place the dialogue here to compensate for that.
Recovery reaches Solitude, you'll be called in immediately.
What you can do then is that you could split it here and just drag this one to start a bit sooner.
Immediately. We're best off waiting in Whiterun for an escort north.
And that's one way to fix it. So know that the lip syncing process is not perfect. I guess it's okay to have an example that's not perfect either, just so you're not discouraged if the results are not amazing. You just sort of have to hope for the best. Now this last one right here, which is a line from Groth. I'm gonna have to pull up my Groth dialogue from episode 1. Good thing I still have those files around. I haven't gotten around to deleting them just in case I wanted them. This is the episode 1 Groth file, so we'll take the first piece of dialogue here and we'll make it fit. Just there we go.
Quiet, Argonian. Request permission to speak, or hold your tongue.
Alright, that seems to work. Maybe push a bit forward. That's a bit too much. Something like this. That can work. Alright. So right now we have a smooth zoom in.
I've instructed the remaining 2 sorcerers who
Skips
are
over the
keeping
part
metery
where I open the
safe
console
to make sure
commands.
that these mages have a proper burial.
Synced up dialogue.
When word of your...
And sometimes you can't get it perfect because they move their lips faster than they're supposed to, and we'll just have to accept that and do our best, you know, with the tools that we have.
Your recovery reaches Solitude, you'll be called in immediately. We're best off waiting in Whiterun for an escort north. Quiet, Argonian.
Again, seamless.
Request permission to speak, or hold your tongue.
And that is how you can have several lines said in a single sweep. So if you wanted to, you could totally make these like all separate say commands, but it's a bit of extra work. So it's sort of nice when you can just use one say command to trigger like 10 sentences in a row. It's a neat little feature. Okay, but this is all very quiet right now because we don't have any form of background noise. I'm gonna go ahead and move these up here. Make this our background ambient layer. We can call this one voice. And how would I get ambient from this area? Well, what I recommend you do is that you launch up Skyrim and you place yourself in Solitude and you just put down every other sound except for the ambient sounds and you just record that and you use a sound clip of the ambient in Solitude inside your project. That is the best way to recreate a mood, is to literally be there, but make sure you don't have any sources you don't want, like people talking to you as they pass by, as they love to do. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Okay, so here we are in Solitude, same time of day, same area, roughly. And so what we're going to do is that we're going to hit escape. open up the settings, go to audio, keep the master high, turn off the footsteps, and I believe the effects. I think you only need the ambience for this one. Maybe someplace you'd like effects, like if you're trying to get like the sound of a horse walking, you would need the effects, for example, which I did in episode 3. Then we can keep the ambience on a waterfall. So that is now the only audio you will hear in the game. So just start your recording, stand still, and get a good long sample. And then you simply import this video into your editing software and just use the audio of it. Simply put. I mean, if you have any way of just recording audio from the game and not video along with it, that's even better, but I'm not really sure how to do that. So I'm just going to record video and take the audio from the video, place it in the background, and it'll be so legit. So let's say that this is a good sample, and let's go back to the editing software. Okay, so we're back in our editing software, and I'm going to pull in what we just recorded. Kijora standing still in solitude, so make sure it's trimmed. I had to be recording the entire time because I wanted to show you whatever. There we go. This is a clip of me standing still in solitude. Press U to unlink it and delete the video layer. And now we can take this file, place it in the background. Control C, Control V to make a copy of it. And there we go. Plenty of background noise from solitude. So it's very subtle, but it's just something that adds that little extra ambient to the scene. It actually seems very subtle in this one. In some scenes, the ambient is more important, but apparently it was very quiet here in Solitude. So the next layer you want to add on top of the ambient, which hopefully has more meaning in the scene you're making. Like when I made a scene out at sea, it was important to hear like the ring of the bell and the waves crashing against the boat. There it would be very important to have that. So let's open up, let's say the Oblivion soundtrack. I have the soundtrack right here. We'll like throw down some audio in the background. And lower it so it fits the scene okay. And then he's gonna start talking. And in Sony Vegas, if you want to make the audio sort of change, like I want it to be lower here, higher here, you can hit Shift V on it, or right click and go to switches. That is not where you go. Insert remove envelope volume. And then you can simply just mark an area and move the bar. So right now I can make it go quieter just as he begins speaking.
I've instructed the remaining 2 sorcerers who are keeping the meadery safe to make sure that these mages have a proper burial. When word of your recovery reaches Solitude, you'll be called in immediately. We're best off waiting in Whiterun for an escort north.
Quiet, Argonian. Request permission to speak, or hold your tongue.
Alright, and that's our little project. I mean, it's pretty much done. You have your scene, you have the lip-synced dialogue, which you've added on top to complement him talking. You have the background noise from your scene, which is hopefully more noticeable in your scene than right out here in Solitude. And then, of course, you have some background music if you want, just to make it a bit more interesting.
I've
and
instructed the remaining 2...
keep the viewer's attention. So right now we are going to render this and have a look and see just how it turns out.
I've instructed the remaining 2 sorcerers who are keeping the meadery safe to make sure that these mages have a proper burial. When word of your recovery reaches Solitude, you'll be called in immediately. We're best off waiting in Whiterun for an escort north.
Quiet, Argonian. Request permission to speak, or hold your tongue.
So that's the fruit of our labor. Obviously the camera work could have been better, Martha should have been in clothes. This was just like the basic of a scene. And now you can go ahead and make scenes that look 500 times better than that one. And hopefully what I've taught you today is going to be useful in your future machinima endeavors. This might be the final part of the Machinima tutorial for Skyrim. I might put this as final, but if I ever come up with something more I want to show you how to do, I can just create a 6th part like that. But for now, this is going to be the final part of the Skyrim Machinima tutorial. I hope it helped you. Go back and watch the other ones if you still have more questions about a specific topic. But other than that, have a still good day, take care and stay awesome. But most importantly, everybody, stay dark. Goodbye.